before the Tiger was in operation. In fact, 1.5 years before they were even actually building the first Tiger, this is what Britain was actually fielding on the field of battle. This is the Matilda 1 tank that was first designed in the middle of the 1930s as what was called an infantry support tank. The idea was to keep the border line very rigid, crushed by wire, it's actually got a very thick iron on it, but with just that one machine gun, not much in the way of firepower. And even as this went into service, and they make about 140 of them, and apart from one little moment of glory at the Battle of Arras in 1940, when Matilda 1s and 18 Matilda 2 tanks attacked an advancing German column, that was their lot. Most of them were left in France at the end of that campaign. The Germans picked up some, used one or two of them out on the Eastern Front for internal patrol duties behind the lines, but most of them were scrapped. We're very lucky here, we've got that one that runs, and we've got another complete one in the museum, and some of you may have noticed that we've also got a shell, a wreck of one from the roads that you drive past on the way into the museum. So that's an infantry tank. We follow it up with a Matilda 2 infantry tank, and then we come along with the Valentine, which is also supposed to be an infantry tank as well. The Valentine, though, is actually a fair bit faster than the Matilda 2. It doesn't need to, because again, infantry tank helping the infantry onto a position. They start with the Valentine having a 2-pounder gun. It's actually put together it's not Now this particular example of the Valentine, it was made in Britain. Some Valentines, about 8,000 Valentines made altogether. About 1,200 are made out in Africa, and then later it was used for putting lots of other experimental or aerial vehicles, bits of design, flames, flamethrowers, all sorts of things. The first floating tanks were actually Valentine versions. Now, next one coming on, you hear that lovely rumble. That engine in the back of this tank, this is the Comet tank. That engine finally gave British tanks a bit of wealth so that they could be upped in weight and upped in speed. And that's the famous Rolls-Royce engine in the back that was in the Spitfire. It was called the Merlin. They derated it, they changed it a very little bit, and then put it in a tank, and they called it the Meteor. And that gives the Comet that lovely rumbling sound, because of that big engine in the back, hugely thirsty of course, being a petrol engine of that scale. But the Comet is what's called a cruiser tank. And the idea was the infantry tanks make the hole, and then the cruiser tanks were supposed to go through the gap. And early in the war, our cruiser tanks, again, they suffered from unreliability, but by the time the Comet's coming into service, in late 1944, at last we've got a good engine. And of course, the most important thing on the tank they've done, this is a sporting version of the famous 17-pounder Pearl Firefly. Now, this is the cruiser tank with enough firepower to take on some of those German vehicles. As they were issuing these tanks, the famous German attack at the Battle of the Bulge starts, they didn't finish training on the tank, so they went to fight in the more usual, the vehicles they were used to, such as the Cromwells and Shermans in most of the British armoured regiments. So from that point of view, it doesn't actually see much service. Early in 1945 it gets going again, And it's his literary service, but a number of armies around the world kept their comics in service to an awful lot later. The Irish Army only got rid of some of these ones at the end of the 1970s. Burma had comics in service until the 1980s. So a very important tank in British tank development, because at last it was getting right in terms of firepower, armour protection, and a fair bit of mobility. And the next tank that comes on, again a bit of context. This is the famous Centurion tank that a number of folks in the audience will particularly toy with this famous vehicle. The Centurion really is a World War II tank. The very first models are built. This is it has a superb gun, and it was upgunned. They started with that 17-pounder.
Beware the Tiger Day. It's Tiger Day. Never has one jam of water been no here. The Centurion Monitor.
You can see modern tanks still have that bit of a machine, which is why they often have extra fuel drums on the rear to help extend its range. This particular Centurion is a late model. It spent its last days as what we call an armoured vehicle war improvements. It had a dozer road on front of it. Centurions, the last version of Centurion was actually something called a beach armed recovery vehicle that only came out of service in about 2003 in the British Army. So it's a tank that's still in service, by the way, in South Africa, and also, of course, the Israeli Army has got versions of it converted. So a fantastically successful tank, just a bit too late to see action in the Second World War. Now the next tank coming on, again, a bit of context. This one as well, this is a famous American Sherman tank. And from the Western Allies point of view, this is the tank that basically saves our bacon. Our own tank industry in 1940, we were building airplanes. Those are obviously the Germans fighters tanks. When the Americans came into the war in December of 1941, they had already sent engineers to Europe to look at what they think is going to be needed. The first tank they built, you can see in the museum, the M3 Grant tank, that has a 75mm howitzer in the hull and an armour-piercing high-velocity gun in the turret on the top. Now that was only an interim model. The tank they really wanted to build was this 50mm gun, much longer, more powerful, more accurate, and extra armour bolted on the front to add to the protection levels. So again, beautiful design, completely impractical in wartime. They just didn't have the capacity to build enough of these. It's like building Rolls-Royce cars all the time. Absolutely lovely, but what's the point if in the middle of a battle what you really need is a Ford Escort? That's the problem with many of these German vehicles. And you'll notice we've taken out our Kettenkrad, just to give it a bit of an airing. Again, that was captured in North Africa from Ranker's paratroop brigade that was fighting alongside the Tigers, and again brought back to the UK for evaluation. It looked like a motorbike on steroids. Now, I'll let the Tiger run around and you can just have a listen to it. actually tell off his tank troops if they started stopping their advances to engage with German tanks. He thought that was a waste of their tanks. This was it's a limited warfare. Sherman goes for a number of initiatives development. This one has a 76mm gun, high velocity gun, twin diesel engine in the back, thicker armour, wider tracks, and a key thing for the crew, it has what they call wet stowage. In other words, the actual ammunition is now surrounded in its stowage compartments by water or fluid, so that if you're penetrated, and don't forget the armour on this is fairly thin, if you're penetrated by an enemy anti-tank gun or an enemy tank, hopefully any rounds, any hot bits of metal will be put out by that water jacket around the ammunition before it would set fire to the ammunition. Because this rather mythic phrase, Tommy cooker for the Sherman tank, it was nothing to do about the petrol engine setting fire, it was much more to do about ammunition cooking off. And once they got that wet stowage in place, actual crew casualties went. So, ladies and gentlemen, and then less chance of the enemy knocking you out. Now, in Britain, after the war, we went the other way. We decided that we wanted being able to be upgraded, so the weapons they added.
Beware, son, Tiger Tank. It's Tiger Day. Never has one German war machine been so near. The Tank Museum, Warrington.
Opa, sorry.
So ladies and gentlemen, just again, we'll be moving through see where it's going to go.
Yeah, I could see it now.
Leaving the same route left, driving
I like the